Hey guys, Bruce Kittle here with the Hidden Pearls podcast. We have an amazing episode. Hope you enjoy it very much. We are on with Adam Skolnick. Adam is the ghostwriter for David Goggins' two books. Can't Hurt Me was his first one, came out in I think 2016 or so. And then they just released the new one, Never Finished. And so great read, great listen. Really encourage you to pick up the audiobook. It was really good. But in this podcast, we get into writing, and Adam's journey into becoming a writer and the writing process, and a lot of great tips for young writers and or old writers who are trying to get there. But a lot of great things on just trusting the process, what it looks like and how to do that. And then we unpack the new book, Never Finished, with David Goggins a little bit, and what it was like to work with David and that whole authorship piece. So hope you enjoyed the show. It was really great. And let's roll. All right, Hidden Pearl podcast fans, Bruce and Emma here. We are super excited to have Adam Skolnick with us. Just everything. I don't know where to start with that, but most importantly, he is the man behind the goggles off the Rich Roll podcast, and we're going to get into the whole goggles story. We've got Ben & Jerry's management online as well, trying to help us sort through his employment status. But most of you will note him, in addition to the Rich Roll, as being part of. He is the ghostwriter behind David Goggins' two books, and we're super excited to have him because book 2 just dropped, and really excited to talk to him about kind of all things endurance sports, writing, and just everything. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay.
I like the microphone arm you're working with.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Picked up one of these during the pandemic. It was hard to find them. Everyone was starting a podcast. So,
Yep. Yeah, we're traveling, so we don't have our big set with us. So we're not back at our.
But we just started using the Shure microphones. They're awesome.
So pretty good. Well, let me do a little bit of a bio on you, just so people kind of know you. So anyway, award-winning independent journalist, author covering adventure sports and the environment, and some other stuff for New York Times Outside. I found one that had Playboy in it and one not. So I didn't know if you were trying to keep Playboy out.
No, I wrote for Playboy for years and loved it. I have not written for them in a minute, but yeah, of course. I mean, I always loved that publication. I'm not running from that publication, never would, but, and a lot of good people over there. So no, I don't know, who knows why, who writes these bios?
I don't know. So anyway, all right. And then obviously Lonely Planet. So you got those. And free diver and open water swimmer extraordinary. You're swimming with the sharks. We like all that. And you got the goggles. So author of, and I know I missed some stuff, Lonely Planet Travel Guide. I found Dispatches from the Gulf.
You dug that one up.
Yeah, I know. Well, I try to, check things out. So I don't know if we'll get to that one, but that looked like that's a whole story there.
Yeah.
And obviously ghostwriter, narrator of the David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished. So we'll come back to that. And kind of, I think, is it bi-monthly? I don't know. I always get confused.
It's like 1 or 2 times a month generally, but the last few months it's been up in the air because his schedule's been different. Yeah. So it's whenever he's feeling the mood to get into a roll-on type podcast, then he rings me up.
All right, at least once a month with Rich Roll at the podcast. So and really that's where I was introduced to you, just because I've been listening to Rich Roll for a long time, and that and honestly, I would just say too, we were talking about before we got on. You guys during the 220 election kind of helped me keep my sanity because, man, I had COVID. I had long COVID, and I was in the midst of that. And then the 220 election was just like almost more traumatizing. Those were hard times for a lot of people, given everything that was going on in the country and all that. We don't have to unpack all that, but I always felt like we could flip that on. And if we caught a Rich Roll, there was just a semblance of normalcy. It was kind of affirming that I didn't feel like I was going completely crazy. So I guess I just want to say thank you for that, because I thought you guys did a great job trying to be moderately open, but yet at the same time being clear about where we thought our values were at and some of the things that were important. So anyway, I thought you guys were a really important voice during that time. So
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And then obviously we'll get back to the Goggins stuff. So that's all really good. So I guess we were talking because the book just dropped last week on the 6th. Yep. And when you and I've been nagging you for a bit, and you were gracious enough to say yes. And so we wanted to time it with the book drop. And so that's pretty cool. So we were imagining, Oprah and all the TV shows, and you're doing all the kind of stuff. And you just told us, no, life's been pretty well normal. I haven't done much of anything. But anyway, how's the book drop going? And just tell us a little bit about what it's like to do that. Because the second one had some anticipation because his first one blew it out. You guys did a great job, and I have a whole bunch of questions. We'll kind of circle back to that, but we just want to touch in with you. So how's it been since that second drop, and what's happening with you?
It's been exciting. Anytime you have a book come out, it's exciting and a little bit, you get nervous and get the nervous energy and all of that. And, because you spend so much time putting some of this together, like we started 2 years ago. So a 2-year process that kind of culminates in this one day or the first week. There's a lot that comes out, and now you I'm the type of person, when I have something big happening, whether it's going on a long trip that I've been looking forward to, or maybe in your world, like a big game, or like a bit, the book comes out, I actually get kind of flat. I don't get like super pumped up. My energy goes a little bit flat. And so I was kind of like that in the last week, but in terms of how things are going, it couldn't be really going better. It's happening the way it was anticipated. David, this time though, didn't do like a bunch of hits. He just did Joe Rogan's podcast so far, and he'll do I think he'll be on a couple other, he might hit the night, like one of the big news networks in January, and he'll be doing a few more pods here and there. But unlike last time when it was we wanted to hit these podcasts, the book itself has the first book had a following. So really we just needed to get it out there, and people were hungry for it. And obviously, I think we sold in the first week far more than we sold in the first month of Can't Hurt Me. So it's going, people are interested and they're excited. And the great thing is that the book is great. We worked really, really hard on it. We didn't fall into the trap of trying to be something. We just tried to make what we had the best possible. And it just turned out, because the way David lives and how he tells stories and how he unpacks his experiences and delivers them, that was enough to make it really special. And his own evolution as a human, as a leader, is evident, I think, in it. And it's all part of it. So really excited that it's out there and people are excited about it. In terms of my daily life, it's been pretty much normal. I've just been in my office, like 2-finger typing away on new work and checking the Amazon rankings like a psychopath. That's basically what I've been doing.
It's like the stock market kind of.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's really good. Well, I just can't imagine how fun that is and everything. So it's a really exciting process, and I want to get back. I put this in that we were going to chat about this, but that was when I was listening to the audio. We got through that, but I decided that I'm going to try to have an interesting life enough to either get David or The Rock to do to do some kind of intro, because either one of those two guys would signify that I've done something interesting with my life. I don't know if it'll be endurance sports, because I'm 63 now, so I don't know, but we're going to keep working at it. But I thought that was really cool, and we're going to get into and I really want to chat with you about the audiobook too, because I think the in between the chapters thing, I think you just added a whole nother dimension. Really enjoyed that on the first book, and and the value of that is it's so cool, because it just takes you behind the writing process.
Yeah.
And I thought the dynamic between the two of you guys was so great. And I just think you guys really did a great job with that. That must have been, and some of the clips on Instagram that you showed, and the little, just being in the room together. And it felt like the energy for you guys was really genuine, and you guys really got along really well. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it is. People think of David as this super intense dude because that's what comes across on Instagram, and because of the experiences he puts himself through, that comes out sometimes. But when I'm working with him, I find he's very relaxed. He's very, dedicated to what he's doing, but he's very open. So we've always had a really great working relationship. Sometimes, my job is just to hit record and let him go. And he does get into that intense headspace so he can kind of channel his feelings. And so my job as a ghostwriter oftentimes is to stay out of the way and try to piece it together so that it's accessible for people, and that it really encapsulates the stories he's trying to get across and the points he's trying to get across. So that's how I looked at this, especially this second book, is to stay out of the way. And that doesn't mean that I didn't dedicate myself to it. It just means don't try to put my own voice, my own head into it. If you find yourself doing it, step back, because what people want is David kind of going for it. And so because I have that, I think, connection with him where I understand him in a way that's deeper, I think, than a lot of people. It's just something about us that we understand each other, even though we're so different in a lot of ways. We have some very interesting, similar overlaps. And so, I'm just lucky that the first one came across my desk, that opportunity, and that we've been able to stay connected. And he invited me back in for the second run.
Yeah.
Well, we bought it right away and listened to it. So it was very interesting. It's really good. Very motivating. I feel like I've woken up every morning and been like, I'm going to go for a 100-mile run, or like, for today. I called him. I was like, we got to go run before we talk to Adam.
I know, we got to get our miles in. No, you know what's really great? We do a bunch of stuff with veterans, and we're doing a couple half triathlons in the spring. And then there's that part in the book where David is talking about, he gets calls to do training, and the guy says, yeah, I'm training for a half tri. And he's like, he totally disses him. Like, the fuck are you doing a half tri for? What are you lame? What?
Right.
It's like, because I bike and swim, but like I haven't run a lot for long. So like that's a chunk for me. And then I felt like I came up and talked to him, and I go, God, I'm just worthless. Like
the half marathon versus the marathon.
Yeah, right.
That was pretty funny, because like the most I've ever run is a half marathon. So but I think he's just kind of pointing out like these ways we stop ourselves. It's funny, The Rock, bringing up The Rock and his blurb. Obviously, we were stoked to have him involved, but a lot of those guys love David. It's interesting who follows him and takes to him. It's people who are struggling, the very bottom, people, grandmas and grandpas, people like The Rock, Steph Curry, those people, Chris Paul, as your son, I'm sure. It's like it's that like these elite athletes also love him. Like, this is who they look up to, someone like that can even show them they have more. Because what's great about David, and what's great about a lot of elite athletes, is they're looking to flip every experience that's hard into some way that could be an advantage to them. And that's like the trick, right? And that's the trick I think David gets into more than most people. It's also a trick, I think, having interviewed a lot of athletes, that a lot of them are just geared for that. This thing happened, how am I going to make it work for me? Because that's the only way. Otherwise, you get trapped, right?
There's no doubt. Yeah, and we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into that, because the mindset thing is really huge. So I think that's really true about, when you enter into that space, how you're going to respond, and not seeing it as, adversity, but seeing it as an opportunity to learn more about yourself and about life and about other people. And David does that really well. And I thought that part of the book came out. And the difference between book 1 and book 2 is really, the first one's kind of the storytelling of that. And then this one's kind of a reflection back, but yet his growth during the in-between after book 1. And really, I didn't know a lot of that story. So that was a pretty cool part.
Yeah.
Okay, before we jump, I want to get into your background, but I just wanted to hit on, the ghostwriter thing, what you said about keeping yourself out of it and kind of being invisible. I think that's because, if you're authoring your own book, you have the story and it's kind of your story and you're telling it and everything. And then the role of the ghostwriter, it really does feel that like you almost have to set your own ego and identity aside in a way. And you really do. You're just this neutral, like you're like a baseball catcher. You're catching the story in a way without altering the pitch from the author, in a way. And it really feels like that. And that is a special gift. And then plus sustaining the presence that you need in order to let, the storyteller, David, not be impeded by your presence or your suggestions and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's really an art to that whole piece, being able to kind of stand in that flow and have that energy that, enables them and frees them and keeps them in their kind of their creative space without hindering it, at the same time being able to catch the story and then recreate it in a way that honors who they are. And I really felt that in the book, because I always feel like you do such a great job reflecting that back to him and making sure it's David Goggins or Goggins coming out. And I thought that was really well done. So good job.
Thank you. I mean, there's several drafts that go in there, and I'll come up with a first draft, and then he'll get in there and tinker. This time it was different than the first, where it was really just a series of interviews. Then I would give them a draft of a chapter, them meaning David and his manager, so his fiance Jennifer Kish, and they're basically running everything together. It's just the two of them. It's really a small operation.
Yeah.
And so then they go over it, and David kind of makes his notes. And sometimes he'll put in new chunks. So it's not just me writing. Sometimes he'll pop in stuff that he wanted to add. And so often he's really nuking it down. So the storytelling, the first go around was really me giving them a draft, which is usually my third draft. My first draft when I deliver anything is usually my third or fourth draft. And then they'll take a look at it. The first time it was a little more minimal notes because these stories had been told several times. I'd heard them even myself many times before we even started. This time it was brand new material and stuff I didn't know. And so often he would have to weigh in and give it more, weight and more impact. And so it really was a true collaboration in the writing, because writing is rewriting. And in terms of being a service as a ghostwriting is service, but really all writing should be service. I think you should be as a reporter or an author. You're serving a story. So when you are reading a book and you can feel the author's ego, to me that's unfortunate. It happens. Doesn't mean that there aren't great writers that aren't egotistical. I mean, I think a lot of us are. I just personally think as you mature as an author, your need to have this voice, your need to have some sort of like imprint on the story fades. And what really matters is the story you're telling. And so if you could be of service to the story, even my first book, One Breath, I was so concerned with being able to turn it in on time. The last thing I was thinking about was, this is going to be so great for me. I was thinking of Nick Mavoli's family, the diver that's the focus of that book, who died. I was thinking of the people that I'd interviewed and how this would impact them. I wasn't thinking about me. So it helps as a writer to not think about yourself, because the more you make it about yourself, I think, the harder it is to get it out. And even David, this book was never about him. He kept saying it's about the reader. It's about the reader. It's about the reader. That helps you as a creative person to flow, I think.
Yeah.
Well, before we get a little bit more into David, I want to pull it back because you're a guest today and we really want to focus on you. So a little background wise. So where and with who did you grow up? Maybe what was your family situation like, and any core lessons that you learned from them?
I grew up in Santa Monica, California. I live here still today. And so in Southern California, middle child, my parents are still together. My dad's an attorney. My mom is a teacher. I got an older brother, younger sister, and core lessons. I think the thing I take the most is, to be kind and to be generous and travel. And, this thirst for other cultures and new experiences. My mother was bilingual. She speaks Spanish. So that was kind of imprinted on me early, this desire to travel and immerse in other languages and cultures.
Do you speak Spanish?
Yeah, I'm conversational in Spanish, and for a while I was conversational in Spanish and Indonesian, and I had some Thai. But wow. I'm off the Lonely Planet train now, man. So I've lost it a little bit, but Spanish is still hanging in there.
When you did all of those assignments, did you study the language before, or did they put you through some language? Were you just kind of thrown into the deep end?
No, I mean, it was I had to claim a certain, I guess. Not mastery, definitely not mastery, a certain ability in the languages. I just claimed it. No one really asked, but I did have Spanish by then. I had traveled to Indonesia a bunch by then. And so I had some Indonesian. So I just made it work. But and they did work. And then when you're out there, after about a week, if you're especially in places I was where, you're the only Westerner around, you got to have it or you're not going to get very far.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Language is pretty cool. Well, so when you were growing up, did you know that you wanted to be a writer, or when did that kind of path take off for you?
No, I didn't. I wasn't really focused on that. I kind of was just doing the track. I was interested in music in high school, interested in sports before that. Writing didn't really hit me until I graduated from college, and I was working as an activist. I was running campaign offices for the Sierra Club. And sorry about this noise, but so I was running, I was just running neighborhood campaign offices, trying to protect ancient forests, basically. And I was doing that for a couple of years. I did it in DC, I did it in LA, I did it in Seattle. And at some point I started to realize that I needed something else, because it wasn't really, it was really hard work, 14-hour days, not getting paid a lot. And I liked it and I valued it, but it was burning me out. And I wondered kind of what do I want? What do I want to do? And at the time I had one of my best friends growing up is a screenwriter, and he had just kind of broken in and done very well. And I thought writing is something I had an affinity for. I'd started to journal before that. So I'd been journaling and kind of more stream of consciousness, like beat poetry and that kind of stuff I was really interested in. I was really interested in the beats and really interested in all of that. So I was kind of practicing that. And I felt like I had some affinity for it, but I wasn't trying to make it as a writer. And so then, years later, after doing another environmental job here in LA, planting trees around Los Angeles and the mountains around Los Angeles, it just kind of came back up for me, and I realized I wanted to pursue it. So I took a more strategic tack and started to write screenplays with that friend, with Kelton Reed, who hosts the Writer File. So he and I were both kind of like trying to figure it out. And we wrote screenplays together, tried to sell those. At the same time, I started breaking into magazines and tried to try my hand as a journalist.
All right. Well, just coinciding though, but tell us, why Sierra Club? Why, how'd you get involved in all the environmental justice and social justice issues? What was the trigger that kind of pulled you into that as a young person coming out? How'd that happen?
So I was interested in social justice. I got really into it in my senior year of college. I had spent the fall semester working on the Clinton campaign in DC. That's how old I am, dating myself. But
I remember those were good times, man. That was a great election.
It was a great election. Great election. So I still
remember we were living in Madison, Wisconsin at the time, and their whole campaign came on the Capitol, and it was like a rock concert. It was so much fun. That's a whole nother story. But I have vivid memories of that whole time. Yeah.
He was a rock star for sure.
Yeah.
And so I was involved in that. And then out of that, I kind of started thinking, do I want to get involved in politics? Do I want to get involved in Hollywood? LA is a place I came from. So obviously I knew some people that were involved in that, not anyone close to me other than, I had one good friend whose family was, but not he was still a kid like me. So I didn't even consider it that way. And so I thought about Hollywood and I thought about, politics. And then I realized that the real heroes aren't involved in that stuff. The real heroes are actually on the ground doing it. And so I was interested in that. And then I found a job opportunity. I don't know how I found it, but there was basically, they were teaching people to organize, but they were teaching them to organize around environmental issues. And at the time, environmental issues were not like on the top of my list. I wasn't really even super connected to nature like I am now in that way. And so I was really interested in American history and social justice movements and that kind of stuff. And so I was really coming to it from a kind of just a more urbanized perspective. And just meaning I was a city boy. But I understood the strategy. The environment is a thing that can unite a lot of people around some of these same core issues, campaign finance issues, other things, and influence of corporations on the government and how that works. And so I got involved in that organization and took a job for no money and learned a lot about kind of how nature fits into that whole paradigm. And so that's how I got into it.
Well, that's pretty cool. So, I know, and it's always kind of interesting. You speak very passionately about it when you're sitting with Rich Roll, at least on some of those issues as they come out. So it's been embedded pretty good. Yeah, I just didn't know if your mom and dad were like hardcore or something.
No,
or you just kind of.
No, I mean my parents went to Berkeley. They met at Berkeley, but they weren't like the kids kind of raising hell at Berkeley.
Okay.
Yeah, they were there, so it's going to get in there. And my mom was always a little bit more liberal than my dad, but no, always were liberals. But I think more like kind of just liberals as we have always thought them, kind of like liberal ideals, but kind of more mainstream.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little side question. So just going back to your interest in music, when you're writing, do you have a go-to playlist or music that you like to listen to?
Good question.
It's a great question. I don't, if I do listen, I usually don't listen to music when I'm writing, honestly. And I listen to it, obviously, I listen to it in the morning and night and every other time, but I don't listen to it usually when I'm writing. But if I do, it can't have English lyrics.
Yes.
It just distracts me too much. So sometimes I'll do some like kind of ambient music. I'll do some ambient playlists or some electronic, really low level. Sometimes some jazz, but it has to be kind of, it can't be too you know how jazz can be kind of spiky and it just goes all over the place. It can't be too much like that. So, you know, it has to be something that kind of is wallpaper for me. So sometimes it happens. Sometimes I do that. But it's not typical.
Do you have a favorite artist that you're listening to when you're not writing right now?
A favorite artist? All my stuff. I like all the old shit, man. I listen to a lot of John Coltrane. I listen to a lot of jazz. So, you know, Coltrane just happens to be the guy usually at the top of my list. He's my favorite, but I listen to a lot of jazz. And then I've been listening to the thing that you can get that people might not be clued into. We have a radio station here called KCRW, which is the alternative radio station in Los Angeles. It's a nonprofit based out of Santa Monica College. And they have a great app. And Henry Rollins, I don't know if you're familiar with Henry Rollins, but he was a punk rocker from back in the day that's been a radio DJ for many, many years. And to me, his set lists are fucking amazing. And I listen to him. I listen to him once. He's got a show once a week. And KCRW.com, you can find it, or they have a playlist, or they have an app, and you can listen to any of their shows. And a lot of their DJs are great. I love them. But Henry Rollins is a lot of fun, especially if you like, it goes anywhere from jazz to rockabilly to punk. It goes all over the place. A lot of times, a lot of it's spent in the punk space though. And it's great.
Okay. We're going to try that out. Thank you.
We spent some time down in LA. So I'm in Costa Mesa now. So
oh, cool.
Pretty close.
So 89.9 is the channel up in LA area. I think it might be a little bit, there might be a different point 3 or 5 or something down by you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And then and then you mentioned your beat poetry. Do you have a sample that you could riff off for us here or not?
I know. I'm not one of those writers that has memorized books. You know, I wish I was. I was
just waiting.
Let's see. I think my favorite Kerouac excerpt is, I keep endless mental searching and geographical meandering in search of the holy inside milk.
Oh. John was pretty tight.
Thank you. I think I might have left a word or two out, but I think that's really it.
Yeah. Isn't he? To those who don't hear the music, they think the dancer's mad. I think that's John too.
Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of out there. He's got some great stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, let's talk about. All right. So I got down journey into the process of writing and becoming a writer. So now you kind of clarified, and I have this kind of the Lonely Planet stage and/or your articles and all that. So
yeah,
I mean, so as you're making this transition, you talked about script writing and all that kind of stuff. Talk to us a little bit about, and I guess what I was really getting to is like I've got we talked a little bit about the War of Art, and there are other volumes out there that kind of talk about that. But the two things that I really got out of the War of Art was, is recognizing that the gift that we have isn't our own. Like, and I'm really personally into the whole muse notion, in that
yes,
we tread lightly on the frailty of our creativity. And as soon as we try to own it or dominate it or whatever, it seems like we've crushed it too hard. And so it's like this gift, and there's this delicate balance about entering into the creative space and being able to kind of tap into that. So that's kind of the one notion. And then the second notion for me was really about just the laborious process of writing, because it is it's hard freaking work. Like being great at anything, David running, whatever it is, the workouts, any athlete, any profession, John Coltrane, all that stuff. People grind a lot more than other people want to imagine. So I guess what is the other thing? So I guess I'm just, thinking about your development as a writer. It's a lofty idea. You start to get some experience, but then there's every day getting up and sitting at it, however you write. And it's that grinding process that isn't always a lot of fun and is a shit ton of work. So I guess either one of those, just how did that unfold for you as you were discovering your gifts, and then you were writing kind of the Lonely Planet stuff, and then also I guess you had to have a vision too for exploring into other realms. So that's a huge question, I know, but you can kind of go anywhere you want with it.
Yeah. I'll just try to encapsulate it and quick and as tight as possible for you guys, because I don't want to bore you with my life story, because it's
we did ask you on the podcast.
Right.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, we kind of
want to talk to me. Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not boring, but it's kind of it went like this. Kind of, I got into writing, and this was like in 2000 when I first started to try to do it. And so over the period of those 7 years, from 2000 to 2007, I was trying to be a writer. I didn't feel like I was even that good at it. And so I was trying, that meant I was trying to sell stories to editors at publications. I started out in kind of the alternative health and yoga and wellness space. And so I was doing stuff for local publication I don't even know if Whole Lifetimes exists anymore. So I did something for them. I did something for Spa Magazine came calling. I did something for Spa Magazine, and so I got hooked up with them. But the goal always was to write my way around the world. That was kind of always the goal from the beginning. And so, but I was able to sell stories in that alternative health space that was really starting to boom, because that space, that lifestyle space that we all is really mainstream now, it was just starting to happen in a mainstream way back in the early 2000s. So I kind of rode that yoga wave, and someone asked me to help publish a magazine called LA Yoga. So I started that, and through that lifestyle space, I was hooked into the travel space. And so then I started mostly writing travel stories for magazines like Islands Magazine. I did stuff for Spa Magazine. I worked my way into Outside Magazine. But still, it was hard. It was hard to make a living because you don't get paid until the story runs. Often you don't get expenses when you're first starting out. They just giving you a per word rate, which was better then than it is now. But there was less work then. Now there's a lot more work. You get paid less per word. Most young writers do, but they have a lot more work coming to them because there's so many publications out there, so many different avenues online. Back then, it was kind of really hard to find that hook in. And frankly, I wasn't probably as good as I wasn't good enough yet. I was just starting to get better and better. And so I was, and also my work habits, I wasn't, now if I had my work habits now, when I first started, I could have accomplished more. But at the time, sitting in front of that computer and figuring out how to spend all that time every day staring at the computer and to actually be productive, it wasn't easy for me. What changed my work habits was Lonely Planet helped me in two very important ways. One was it allowed me to not be behind on my bills, because I was in an eviction notice stage for a couple of years there. From like 2004 to the end of 2006, I was broke all the time and late on rent almost every month. And it was not uncommon to come to see an eviction notice on my door. Luckily, when I first moved into that place, the person doing the accounting on rent just happened to be this angel. And she was so lovely, just a lovely woman, probably in her 60s, that had been there for a while at this real estate firm. And she was not about like grinding people. And I would call her and I would apologize. She said, "That's okay. You just bring it over when you can. And as long as I wasn't over 30 days, then she was cool." And so I just happened to be able to do that. Somehow I was able to make it in within that 30-day time period. When they sold the building in the middle of my eviction notice phase and a different person was involved, there wasn't any of that. It was 3 days or quit. And so I had a couple of those tight ones too. So luckily I was able to make it through. Sometimes I borrowed money. Sometimes I had to work an odd job. That's when I started to work for Ben & Jerry's, and I've kept that going out of loyalty to Ben and Jerry. But then, the Lonely Planet thing happened. I was like, I forget how it happened. I went to some press junket. It was like speed dating for Canadian tourism. They invited a bunch of travel writers to a hotel, and you met a lot of vendors and hoteliers and adventure travel companies that are based in Canada. And it's a big event. They do it once a year in America. It's for all the American kind of press to come and see what Canadian travel is all about, tourism. And a Lonely Planet editor was there, and I was a huge fan. Obviously, I'd used it many times. And so I got along with her, and she said, "Why don't you work for us?" And I said, it's funny. I tried to several years before, and I didn't get past like the intro note stage, but I'd gotten better. And so she basically got me past that first wave, and I had to go through their process. There's a kind of a test you have to take that basically you're writing a fake version. And once you get there, you're in the pool. And so I found myself in the pool. And so Lonely Planet then became a way I would get advances. It was more of like a publishing deal. They give you some of your money up front because you needed to travel. And so that changed everything economically for me. I was no longer behind ever again. Well, not ever again, but I was no longer behind for several years. And then also the deadlines were so tighter than anything I'd ever had to deal with before. And the number of words you had to put in was so much heavier than anything I'd ever done before. I was going from, "Hey, you have to write 1,500 words for us by this date," to, "Hey, you got to research this whole chapter in the Lonely Planet book, which is, a lot of minutia in there, and then file your 50,000 words within 6 weeks or whatever it was. And so to me, those numbers were just like beyond my comprehension. And I had a writer named Ian Stewart, who's done, probably 100+ guidebooks for rough guides and Lonely Planets over the years. He's based in the UK. Great guy. He basically took me on my first assignment. He was kind of my mentor. And he said, you got to look at it as words per day. You got to knock out 3,000 words a day. And if you can do that, then you'll chunk out this thing. And that's what you have to do. And so that has become what I do. So, it might not be for every project, 3,000 words, it might be 2,000 words, it might be 1,500 words at the minimum. It won't ever be below that, but that's what I think of. And when I'm really going and feeling it, it's 3,000. And so that's always been the thing. And so that really trained me. And when you put out that volume, your improvement is just exponential.
Wow. You said there's a whole lot there. That's what I'm thinking about Presser in the book. He talks a lot about that, having a minimum word count every day. It's a 3 to 4 hour deal. Yeah. Just sitting at the keyboard, whatever your thing is. And
what I did in that period is, when you think of it that way, you're not thinking of how you're feeling, because often a young writer or a young creator might think, God, if I'm feeling good about this, if I'm vibing, then the work's going to be good. It's really not like that at all. Sometimes you feel crappy the whole time and you're just chunking it out. It's squeezing it out. It takes you 10 hours to write 2,000 words. But it's better than the kind that flows 3,000 words in 2 hours, which can happen too. So it's basically how good the work is often doesn't reflect how you felt about it as you were writing it, if that makes sense. And so you kind of have to separate yourself from that. And yes, if over the course of a few hours, if you sit every day, 5, 6, 7 hours at the desk, there's going to be times where you do feel it and you do know it's good. And that's what you're always hoping for. But those flow states, you can't count on a flow state to finish a book.
No doubt.
Do you have different practices or routines that take you maybe not into that flow state per se, but things that, like, when you sit down, you're like, all right, before I go, I'm going to take a walk, or I have like this candle burning, or I'm drinking this, or like, do you have like a whole checklist to kind of like get yourself mentally adapt, or
like an athlete before a game?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I used to feel more sacred about it, but to me, it's become really more utilitarian. I've written in the backseat of cars. I've written behind mini marts. I've written in hotel rooms many times. It's like, to me now, it's not a sacred act. It's like building a wall with bricks. And so I look at it more that way, which isn't to say that those things aren't useful. At times I'd found them useful. What's useful to me is to like do some sort of exercise in the morning just to clear my head and get awake, but I don't do those kinds of things anymore. The less sacred I think about it, the easier it is for me to engage in the work.
The transition from non-writing into writing is more fluid for you when you don't have to do all that stuff. So you don't have to worry about you just sit down and start going, and it takes over.
Yeah, it's more of I look at it more as a craft than an art. And it doesn't have to have a certain energy space around it for it to be, good work. That's just how I think of it now. That's not to say that I don't have friends that do those things, because it makes them feel, whatever makes you feel like you can engage in the work, that's what you should do. But there's no rules around it. That's just something that, for me, the less I think of it as a precious thing and just work, actually the easier it is for me to kind of unfold myself into it.
Yeah. It almost seems though, if you don't make it a big deal and then you're just there, once you're there, you never know what's going to happen. And then you can slip into some of that stuff. But if you don't make a big deal about it, you don't worry whether it shows up or not.
Right.
And you just
there's less pressure. There's less pressure thinking of it as a build, like building bricks, or like laying bricks. It's just more of a Taoist Zen approach than kind of like trying to find the muse approach. That's not to say that the muse will come to you in different ways. I think, I love that idea of the muse. And, you were talking about, I think when we were talking about Stephen Pressfield and War of Art, it's funny. I watched Jordan Peele on a Daily Show not too long ago. I don't know if you saw him come on, and he was plugging a horror podcast or something. But just the way he talked about this story wanted to be a podcast is how he said it. So that just clued me in to, that's how he thinks of these things. He's a great artist. He's one of the great creators of his generation, and he thinks of it he's speaking to the story and he's a servant of the story. That's what that said to me. I don't know him at all. I have no idea if that's how he thinks of it, but that's what it sounded like to me. And I thought that's why he's so good, because he's thinking, what does this story want? And that's what to me, it's not surprising that he's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really different perspective that way. Just like out in the space cosmo, there's this story.
Yeah.
And it's like reading the story, understanding the story, identifying with the story, and then finding a way to reveal that story in the way that is honest to that story.
Well, that's his process, right? Like as storytellers, stories come to us in different ways and they do talk to us. The stories do talk to us. They bloom in our brain, or maybe they're something you're doing on a reporting job, or something like I'm doing with David. Either way, these stories come to us and they talk to us and they won't let us go. And so, you live with that story. So you do really talk to that story. I mean, it's in your head all the time.
Huh.
It's not always great.
How many stories do you think you have running in your head at one time?
I mean, ideally so there's always a few, because you're thinking of new ideas at the same time that you're doing something else. So there's always at least a few. But I tend to, when it starts to really get grinding and going, I focus on one thing at a time, because it's the only way I can do it. I can't multitask that well. So when David's thing started to really roll, that's all I was doing 100% of the time. But that you're right. There's other story ideas that come to me and I just jot them in my notes app. That's it for me. I put it in my phone, jot it in my notes app, and then I come to it when there's space and time.
Cool. Creativity. All right. And then we're going to jump into the roll-on era. But before we do that, so if there are young authors out there, aspiring writers and artists, and you've touched on a whole lot of stuff, so I think great stuff. Anything else that you would recommend to them? Any other kind of tidbits from your toolbox that might be helpful for folks?
Well, if you really want to be a writer, you got to read. So, it's funny when I hear people that say it's the first book I've read in like 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And I get it. There's a lot to do now. We have the phones and all that, but you got to read books, like if you really want to get better, you got to read. So that's the number one. And in terms of just like, I think the one thing I can say is that it takes an optimistic point of view. Or not, it doesn't take an optimistic point of view, but you have to try to spin to the positive, because you're going to get kicked in the face a lot. There's a lot of rejection in any sort of creative pursuit, and in sports too. I mean, you see it, like there's so much rejection, and even now I'll get rejected more than I'll get yes when I pitch a story. So it's like, you have to be able to deal with that, and you have to not take it personally. So the less things you can take personally, the more kind of silent work you're doing on the side, reading, and then putting the time in, the daily time, the words per day, that's what it takes.
Perfect. Yeah. We talk about the 3 Ps all the time. It's not personal, it's not perfect, and it's not permanent.
Love it.
You know what I mean? It's just like, they're rejecting on their basis, and they may be looking for a different, whatever it is what it is, and don't take it personal. And then nothing's going to be perfect. Your relationships, this piece of work I'm working at it, but it's not permanent. This rejection's today, but tomorrow, I'm rewriting my own story, and tomorrow I can show up and make something else happen. And so just not letting any of that shit stick to you too hard.
I love it. It's such a clear way of thinking when you look at it that way, but it's not easy in the moment. It can be hard.
Super painful. Yeah. It takes, and that's something, that's part of the mindfulness practice is you have to practice that. So as you're right in the middle of all that shit happening, and it's really painful, trying to, focus that way and deflect it so it doesn't stick to you and hold you back. That's a hard thing, but
especially when your livelihood's attached to it. And it's like, okay, that's all good. But now I still have to pay rent somehow.
She's not, hey, Adam, we need the dough here. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, let's invite our special friend Rich Roll in anyway. So, I think back in 2020 is kind of when the whole roll-on thing started. So, but how did you get hooked up with Rich Roll? And tell us a little bit, because honestly, the Rich Roll ones, I like the other shows too, but the dynamic that you guys have created is super interesting, and it's always really fun because I like at least the stuff that you guys do. But so tell us a little bit about how that thing has evolved for you and how that whole thing feels.
Well, I think what happened was, Rich has talked about it, is that he saw how things were going in 2020, and it was getting there was the shutdown. He couldn't have guests come to the studio. He was doing stuff on Zoom and trying to make it happen. But he also realized that sticking to this kind of evergreen concept, for up until then, everything was about being evergreen. And he wanted these thought leaders to come in, a lot of them from a lifestyle space, but not all, but they were all thought leader types. And they would come in and deliver a really thorough interview that would be somewhat evergreen, and meaning that it wasn't tied to the ups and downs of the news cycle and what was happening right then. And so, but in 2020, that seemed kind of like an old model to him, and he wanted to be able to respond to what was happening on the ground. And he and I'd been on his show in 2016 after One Breath came out, and so we stayed friends after that. And then he loved Can't Hurt Me, and he just thought, why not bring Adam in and see if that dynamic would work? Because we had talked about working together in different ways. In fact, we had talked about maybe doing a remote thing in Tokyo for the Olympics in 2020. That was kind of the first idea that we had. And then it didn't happen because obviously the pandemic, there wasn't even an Olympiad in 2020. And then, but then he brought me in for this. And so we just did it. I think the first one, I think the first one might've been, I forget exactly what it was. I think it was George Floyd, the first one, but it was really right around all that was happening. Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. And so we just started to go at it, and we did the first one, and he liked it, and we just kept going. And so it's been great for me because the Rich Roll audience is super supportive and super engaged and switched on. And so that's been cool. And it's been a fun outlet for me to get into the podcast space.
So since being friends with Rich Roll, are you plant-based, or how do you eat?
So no, but it's because my wife is plant-based and I'm like 90%. And then I do eat some seafood. I don't eat dairy, and I don't eat beef or chicken or any meat, but I do eat some seafood.
Okay. That is not a litmus test for us. We're all, I guess I wouldn't call it
as good as you can.
Yeah. No meat.
Plant-based as good as you can.
Yeah. We don't,
well, that's good. I mean, like I for some reason, I for a long time, I went without it. I did. For me, the transition happened prior to connecting with my wife now, but it was like through Dan Buettner and Blue Zones.
Yeah.
And who is a friend of mine as well. And who I kind of found through the Rich Roll podcast as well. Right. But then we connected offline somehow. And he's great. I mean, he's a great guy, but his idea of how Blue Zones, you can eat meat like 3 times a month, or you can eat, that kind of stuff. So that's how I steadily kind of shape my diet. And then what I found was eating more and more plants was that I actually didn't like the taste of meat as much as I used to. Your taste buds change. And I had that experience with some fish, but so for me, occasionally I'll eat like sushi maybe once every 6 weeks. I mean, that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah. I spent part of last year in Japan, and I'm going back again in the spring. And yeah, being over there, because I'm mostly vegetarian, and it's just hard not to try it.
It's hard not to. Yeah. No sushi for you. Now you're public about it. You can't have it. I'm just kidding.
All right. So a little while back, Rich celebrated his 10 years in podcasting. And you guys, there were 2 shows, and one, Rich said he had like his core lessons. And I wrote, and typically that my note nuggets and all that stuff. But anyway, and that was like 14 of them. And then you guys did the next roll on, and he had 3 core lessons. He was trying to distill it down. And I don't know.
Oh, right.
Okay. Anyway, so these are the 10, and I guess, and maybe we've already talked about these. So if we have, we can kind of bump them. But I kind of thought they kind of fit in pretty well. So the 3 that he mentioned was about consistency. And I think as it related to the show, he just said, I committed to doing 1 a week. And no matter what, and not every one of them is great, but I'm going to grind. And he felt like that was really important. The other one, he talked a lot about, you guys did, process over outcome, that not being too outcome based. And we're going to circle back to that one, because I think that's a theme in David's work.
100%. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, but it's really about committing yourself, having a clear vision. And you do need a North Star about where you're going and all that kind of stuff. But it's not about finishing a race or getting so many shows. It's committing to the process of who you're going to be and how you're going to be in the journey, and doing those kind of things. And then the last one was about patience, was just that, you want to have all these expectations, you want to maybe reach a certain level and all that kind of stuff, but having a little bit of grace and patience with yourself to give yourself time to kind of work into it, to learn, to expand and grow and doing all those kind of things. So I guess I was throwing those back up at you. and then just asking if those resonate with you and any other lessons that you've really taken from your work with Rich.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is similar about, obviously David and Rich have a lot of overlap because, they are both ultra athletes and they're both great athletes and they come from very totally different backgrounds. And the fact that they're in that same space is interesting. But what they also share is this ability to kind of unpack their own baggage in a way that makes it easier for us to do the same in our own heads, if that makes sense. And I think that's why people gravitate towards them. Consistency, that's what the 3,000 words a day thing is all about. I mean, that's all that is. It's like do the consistent work and then figure out what you have and make it better, as a writer. That's how I look at it. And then process is, again, like that's the only thing I thought about in writing the second book with David is trust the process. The process is what's important. Not, we will get it better because the process is shitty first draft. That is the process as a writer, shitty first draft and make it better and better and better. And so that is the process. So you trust the process, you make it better. And if you, and so 100%. And then, what was the third one? Patience. I mean, like back in like 2004, 2005, beginning 2005, I'd been in Bali for several months. I'd met Elizabeth Gilbert. Are you familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert? Yeah. And so when she was researching Eat, Pray, Love, she and I became friends. And then
you met her like on the Bali trip?
I met her on the Bali trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You one of the characters in the movie?
I'm in the book. I have a line.
Oh, what's your line?
Pelicans.
Pelicans?
Oh. Pelicans. Someone asked me my favorite animal. Kid asked me my favorite animal, and I say pelicans.
Oh.
That's it. That's my
why do you like pelicans?
I still love pelicans. Why not? They're beautiful birds. They they eat sushi. Pelicans eat sushi.
There you go.
So, yeah. I don't know. I always loved their formations, the way they fly and being seabirds. I'm kind of a seabird. But yeah, so when we went back, we met in the summer of 2004. I came back for some more stories. I was just doing a bunch of stories for different magazines. And I came back, brought my sister back at the end of 2004, and she had also come back. And she took us to see Ketut Layer, who's the Indonesian shaman, for lack of a better word, who was kind of helping her, who's a healer. And so he did this thing where he'd paint you, and then he would basically he could tell you what's going to happen. And I was sitting there, and I was very much like, on the edge, like, can I pay my bills doing this? I mean, this is 4 years in, right? So can I make this? Am I any good? Like, should I keep doing this? And he said, and I asked him, I'm like, my question was, am I going to be a success at this? Basically, I forget how the process unfolded, but he basically said, yes. He goes, it's going to happen for you. When you're 47, it's going to be, at the time I was, I was 32 or something. I was 32, 33. Like when you're 47, you're going to have a big year. It's going to be really great. And I thought to myself, I was devastated. Like I could not see my way to 47. I was 32 years old. I'm like, how am I going to wait? How am I going to hack for 15 years? I'm going to be fucking doing this. And 47, when I was 47, Can't Hurt Me came out.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Shaman healers, baby. All good. Well, we're glad you stuck with it. So
yeah, thanks.
Good. Okay, let's see. And we talked. All right. Well, then
that's a great story.
Thanks.
So we'll wrap up the ritual because we got to get into it here. But so we talked a little bit about Ben and Jerry's because you did actually work for Ben and Jerry's, and there's a whole. I've seen the T-shirts with your face on it and the Ben and Jerry's and all that stuff. So
yeah, thank you for verifying it.
Yes, so it's all good. But I want to get into the goggles.
Okay.
For a minute. So your background is as a free diver, but yet you're an open water swimmer as well, and swimming with the sharks and all that. And we have another segment, but I guess.
Can I just correct one thing? You said that I was a free diver and open water swimmer extraordinaire.
Yes.
And I'm more of a free diver, open water swimmer ordinaire. Okay. More of an ordinaire. Enthusiast. That's
well, if you're enthusiastic about swimming in the ocean with sharks, I think that's extraordinary. So
okay, that's different. Yeah. So I got, I've been, anyway, did I cut you off? Did you have more?
No. Well, I'd like to, let's touch on just because I think that's great. And then, the guy with the drone and the sharks.
That
whole
yeah.
thing. But the give and take between you and Rich on the goggles, because I always felt like he was a little harsh. He's kind of mocking, that whole thing. And like, see, my thing, he's kind of an elitist Stanford, like Mr. Swift team and all that bullshit.
Right.
Okay, super rich, but like not everybody's in that category. So I'm more of the plotter with the, I wear goggles, but anyway, and
most people do.
We're scuba divers as well, you know what I mean? So we have both, we have the whole range.
Right.
But anyway, I guess the one thing is your actual swim practices and why you like them. But then I thought that dynamic and the pushback, because the fans, I think they kind of reacted. I think everybody kind of thought he was being a little harsh on you. So
yeah, it's a very nice crowd. Everyone's very kind in this crowd, I never took, he was always just kidding. But the funny thing is that it is weird to be quite honest, it is weird to wear a full mask if you're swimming. It's just not done. Like nobody does that. And so how I came to do that though, is that I was interested. When I injured my back in 2012, so I couldn't run anymore. The only thing I could do is get in a pool. And so I started to swim in the local pool, but I was also already a scuba diver and a tech diver, and I loved it. And a buddy of mine who I used to kayak with way back when around Point Doom in Malibu had started to swim some of that same stretch. And he said, you got to do this with me. He'd done it because he'd hurt his knee. And so I think I was swimming in the pool and like swam over a fucking loose Band-Aid or something gross like that. I'm like, I got to get out of this pool, and so
it's pretty gross.
Yes. And my life at that time was somewhat deteriorating. It wasn't my back. It was like my marriage at the time. Everything was kind of unraveling in a kind of a shitty way. And so I got out to the ocean and I was just using goggles. I was using bigger goggles because I wanted a bigger field of vision. Those wider goggles that sometimes you can get. Yep. Aquasphere, I think. But I was using goggles because it was really all we were doing was swimming. And it wasn't until I started to get into the freediving world and came across this certain really low profile mask that the divers were using up to a point, because you can't use it all the way down, but they were using it up to a point. So when you're doing freediving workshops or trainings, that's the mask a lot of them recommended at the time. It's called a Sphera mask. But the Sphera mask was actually created for open water swimmers. The idea was like this mask company had come up with this idea. Let's create this mask for open water swimmers. It was a terrible idea because open water swimmers don't want a mask. And actually, if you're doing crossings, you're not allowed to have a mask. It has to be just goggles and a Speedo. But I think it was when I was in the Bahamas for the book and was kind of really immersed in the freediving world. I would do workouts in Long Island on the backside, like in the Atlantic Ocean, and across to this little Channel Island. And but the Atlantic is a lot saltier than the Pacific. And so it was really stinging my nostrils and my sinuses, irritating them when I just wore goggles. So I started wearing the Sphera mask as it was designed as a swim mask. And then when we got back to Malibu, you can't equalize a goggles. So what we started to turn that swim in Malibu back out. We were swimming. It used to be just a swim and we'd walk back. We started turning that into an exploration of a reef system on the outside of Point Doom. And once that became more of a dive practice, you can't go as deep, your eyes will bug out. So you're not going 30 feet with just goggles because you'll feel it. It's not so good for you. So, so then you need the mask. So that's how it all happened. And so now that's what I always wear, even when I'm just swimming, because it's what I've gotten used to. So that's how that all happened. But he's right. I couldn't, if I wanted to do a crossing, like one of these Channel Islands and try to make it, it wouldn't even count wearing that mask.
Well, it counts to us. So it's all good. So,
yeah.
All right. And then, but you're still pretty active with the open water swimming and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what, I am. I still swim. I'm in the water. I try to be in the water 3 to 4 times a week, but usually it's like 2 to 3, depending on my life, because, I got a young kid around. And so, just trying to fit it all in. So now it used to be all that time was spent in Malibu doing swim dive sessions, but now it's 2 of them in the week will be just straight open water swims. Between 1 and 2 miles. And then the third one will hopefully be a dive session in Malibu. And then beyond that, I do other workouts too, to make it, when I'm healthy and I'm rocking it, I'm working out 6 days a week. And so I'll be running and swimming usually.
Run and swim. Okay, that's what I thought your others are run. Yep. And your wife runs. Am I right on that?
Yeah, she's better at me than in almost everything, especially running. So she runs really well. I've been on the shelf with running because I popped my post-tibial tendon. Very funny because the post-tibial tendon comes up in the second book in the Goggins book and never finished. But so that happened to me just recently. So I've been kind of taking PRP injections, and so I've been on an exercise bike and swimming.
Okay. Well, there we go.
So the diving's pretty good around Malibu, though?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you like, but there's a marine protected area in Point Doom that allows for the recovery of a lot of these species. So it's really flourishing. And there's a sea lion rookery there and lots of fish and the visibility, as you know, in California is not always that great. So for us, like a really good day is 30 feet of visibility.
Yeah.
But it's like, did you ever see the Blue Planet series for the BBC or maybe it was Netflix, whatever it was. There's an episode called The Green Seas. That's kind of our thing. That took place in Monterey, but it's the whole California coast are green seas. So some days it'll be good, but it'll still be a little bit, minerally. That's just the way it is. But yeah, so we love it. We love it when it's 5 foot viz because, I've had gray whales swim right under me over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to be swimming in Malibu.
Yeah. Come on down, guys. Come on down.
Yeah. Actually,
you'd be more than welcome.
We're going to spend the week down visiting Emma down in Costa Mesa. So we're bringing our little wetsuit and
you are?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Come on there and then check out Crystal Cove. Crystal Cove's a lot of fun. That's much closer to you and it's really good.
Crystal Cove. So we were actually just down my brother played in Mexico. The 49ers played. They had a game in Mexico City. And so we stayed in Cabo a little bit before and we brought our wetsuits and all the things down and we were doing some open water swimming. And I run out the first day and I have I have my scuba goggles on. And he's like, "You look like Adam." And I didn't get the reference. I was like, "Who is I don't get it." And he was hazing me the entire time. He's like, "I'm going to leave you. I don't even want to swim." I was like, "What is going on? I don't even know who this person is."
I know. Yeah. I was giving her a hard time, and then I had to kind of explain the whole deal. And then you came on. I said, the whole story.
Don't feel bad. You're just a dork like me.
There you go.
Honestly, it did feel like there was a wall on my face for the first time. So I
because the scuba dive masks they're not low profile. It's like having a glass box on your face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love it. I love Southern Baja, man. I could live there. I could live down there.
Super, super good. Okay.
Yep.
Well, we do have this other little thing about the new book coming out. So, all right. So let's just a little bit. And I know we kind of talked about that. So the Can't Hurt Me came out in 2018.
Yep.
And I just listened to that episode in the writer file. So I kind of heard that whole story about how your agent had met David and then you guys got hooked up, but you can say some more. And then the never finished piece and all that kind of stuff. So we're kind of talking about that. I really want to talk though about not David Goggins, but more Goggins a little bit.
Okay.
But is there anything else about that book writing process that we haven't talked about? I want to make sure that you had a chance to kind of finish that story, and we can unpack that too as we get into some of this other stuff. But and I'll just say, I watched some of the clips on you guys working together, and we kind of talked about that.
Yeah,
and you already kind of talked about kind of getting out of the way of the story and all that. But anything else about working with David, or that just the writing process itself for those books?
When you're writing a book with David, it's like you have a front row seat to a one-man show and he's just going, and it's really a privilege to kind of hear him go through his process and try to find it and roll. And it's just so much, it's actually a lot of fun. It's thrilling a lot of times, but it's kind of what you hear in the in-between chapter stuff, but in a bigger, less kind of confined way. Because in the studio, we had talked about it before getting into it. So we had an idea where we were going to go, but often I'm just interviewing him like I would any source and just let him go. And it could be something he wants to talk about. So he introduces the topic, introduces the points, but then I'll try to kind of bring more out of it to get depth and detail. And then I'll deliver that to him, and then he'll add more depth and detail. And then it comes back to me. And it just that process, that collaboration, it was just this time, even more than the first one, I really felt it was even more of a synced collaboration, if you put it that way. We really were kind of a fine-tuned machine, but it took a while to get there. It took, I would say, a full year before he was kind of satisfied with some of the material he was getting. And even then, we still had to drill down and find more and find more. And he took that responsibility on himself, saying, I need to give you more. But, it was probably a little bit of both. It was a little, it'd been 4 years since Can't Hurt Me had come out, or 2 years by the time we started. And I hadn't worked with him in that time. So I had to find a way to get his voice back. I had to track back to him. And it took like a full year before we were tracking. And so the dedication to the process and trusting the process is what helped us ultimately get there. And so I mean, the process even this time was even more open, even more engaged. It was just it was a different experience, but the same result. So it just shows you that you can write books in different ways and have the same result as long as you trust whatever process you're working with.
And then once you guys got started, how many times a week did you guys get together?
So it depended. Like, it would go in waves where we would work, and then I'd get the material and I'd go back, and they'd wait for me to return something to them. But we'd go chapter by chapter. And then towards the end, I'm not going to spoil anything, but towards the end, it was like he'd be working because he ended up getting some full-time jobs because, he didn't need them, but he ended up getting some full-time jobs. And so because of those jobs, he would work all day, get up, do his runs, go work all day. And then he'd work with me at night, and it would be every night. So towards the end, the last 6 weeks, it was 7 days a week, every night.
Wow. So for your writing process, were you guys more like big picture, like this is the vibe, and then you kind of like chunked it out as chapters, or how do you guys map that process?
We started out just getting together and kind of talking about what the book would be. And he just kind of he'd already started writing it before I came in. So he'd already started writing it, brought me back in, and we just worked out kind of the beats. What would be good? What fits here? What fits there? And so that's how we started. And then I created an outline, and then we worked that and created these chapters.
Well, then tell us, the first book, and you guys did it in the second book, and it even feels a little bit more elaborate, the in between the chapter kind of conversation. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, because that is one of the, I think, real richness of the audiobook is that you just, you're into that chapter, and some of them are so intense, the stories and, his childhood and all the stuff, between his mom and his dad and all that kind of stuff. Yep. Going on, and then debriefing some of those kind of things and unpacking it. So, I mean, I think that adds a lot of richness and depth because it gets you a little bit behind. And anytime you get to hear David kind of talk in his own words, it's a pretty cool deal. But how did you guys come up with that whole concept, and how was that trying to put all that together?
Well, when we first started Can't Hurt Me, what I would do is when he gave me back the chapter with notes, and then I would read him sections. So it just got to this point. I forget how it started, but I would often read him material back to him. And he just liked how I did it. He just liked my reading voice and my style. And so he asked me to narrate the audiobook. It was kind of a way for him, I think. It was a way to, like, a lot of people don't even mention their ghostwriter. And he felt like, it was a way to kind of give me an opportunity. And I know that was part of his thinking, and part of it was he just liked the style. And then obviously, he kind of came to be who he is by being the ultimate podcast guest. I mean, he has, I don't know how many now, but there was a time where he was like the top guest on multiple podcasts, Rich Roll included. Joe Rogan was one of the top guests ever. And so, like, all these downloads, he was the number one guy. So they love him. But it's also because he's so good on the mic. So you have to have that in there. And the idea came out pretty quickly. I forget how it happened, whether it was his idea or we just organically figured it out. It was like, if I'm going to narrate it, we got to get you on the mic. And so then that's how we did it. Yeah. And so obviously we're going to do that again. If we did it once the first time, and the audiobook was really the driver that made Can't Hurt Me a hit. It was, the print was good, but what happened was they sold out of the print books within like a week or two. And you couldn't get it. And so people started gravitating to the audio, and that with the podcast mashup is what really sent people loving it. And so then that kind of became the driver to make it a bestseller and create this massive book because of the audio. So of course we were going to do it a second time. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. Malcolm Gladwell did something interesting on his, I don't know if it's his last book or the one before that, where he was including kind of podcast oriented stuff in the audiobook. But, we came out first. That was the next one. And I don't know how many do it now. I'm really not versed in kind of the audiobook world in terms of who's doing what, but like you'd think it would be more. I've heard the Bono book is interesting that way. There's like music and he does something interesting with the audiobook. I have heard that.
Yeah. And I guess in the second one too, it just felt like you guys, the comfort level that you had with each other and the questions and the way you unpack some stuff, it really does add some kind of depth because you hear the story during the chapter and some of the lessons, but you do a great job asking him some pointed stuff to kind of, pull at the threads a little bit, which was really good. And I guess I just wanted to, and then I think the segment in the chapter where he interviews his mom.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh. That it just like anybody who's got
Amazing.
a mom, and then if people that have been through those situations and all that with the domestic violence and just his mom being there and I thought too, even after they left, the conversation they had about after she was in Nashville and she was going to school and she's at the university and all that stuff, it was so powerful listening to the two of them unpack that. And then her talk about still living within that prison, even all those years later, and just how long it took for her to get out from underneath that, and just the healing process in that journey. So anyway, I thought that was super powerful.
Yeah.
That whole conversation. So that was a pretty cool deal that they were able to do that. And
yeah,
I thought
Jacqueline was she was amazing. And that's one take. That was like a one take thing, not a dry eye in the house. Yeah.
And it was really cool too, because they mentioned in that he kind of wanted to do something like that for the first one because some of those issues were raised up, but she wouldn't do it during the Can't Hurt Me book. And she was willing to do it this time. So really grateful that she did because it was really cool deal. So, well, okay. Then how about, I penned a couple things, some of these nuggets that I came off. I guess the one I just want to mention is you guys, what I really liked on the second one was David was really clear about this alter ego notion. And I don't know if there's a guy out there, he wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect called Todd Herman. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but
no,
the whole theory, and so in kind of mindfulness or kind of life coaching type stuff, that's this whole thing. But the theory is sometimes we can't do things as ourselves because we have so much baggage and all that, but we can create this kind of ego or this alter ego to step in and be this other person. And so he uses it in business situations and athletics and all this kind of stuff. And it's like transforming yourself. And so we have what we call activation points, and you can learn how to activate your alter ego into certain things in certain situations. So anyway, and that's the whole difference between David Goggins, what he calls Goggins when Goggins shows up. And it mirrors this whole theory really powerfully. Right. So thought that was really cool. I'm just going to kind of.
Well, I mean, that's what he says, right? That's what he says at the beginning of Never Finish is like, I'm not a theorist, I'm a practitioner. But what he does can be proven by all these sports scientists, all these psychologists. They will prove it, but he knows it from experience. And so what's really unique is a lot of people who might thrive experientially, they're not that great at unpacking how. That's what I think is so unique with him. Is like a lot of, I'm sure you see it, right? I'm sure George has seen it in his ascent, is that there's a lot of great ones out there that can't tell you how to be great.
There's no doubt.
But David can, and that's unique.
Yeah. Well, and he certainly does that really well. And just the notion that there are moments in his life where Goggins really has to show up or he would never do or be able to do what he did. And especially when he starts to have all those injuries in the second book, he starts to unpack all that kind of stuff. And it was actually, I thought that dynamic though about he was Goggins and then the book comes out and then he talks about the comfort years and all that kind of stuff. And he kind of lost touch with that.
Right.
And then trying to reintroduce himself. And it was like, he had to struggle and fight. And he had to actually put himself back into what he calls the hurt locker kind of situation in order to tap back into Goggins. And like Goggins had been lost and he had to like re-find him in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the subtext of this book is that he always had said, if I'm not living it, I won't speak it.
Yeah.
And he was on the border. I mean, he was still doing monumental efforts compared to most people. He was still running 50-mile weeks. But he wasn't pushing himself to the same way. Like for him, a 40, 50-mile week, that'd be like most people running 10 miles a week. I mean, that's just the way it is. So he was very living in the comfort zone, not in the hurt locker. And then he had a health scare and he's now looking in the mirror and the mirror is telling him something different than he's never heard before. It's like, basically you're getting a little soft and who are you now? And so that's what this second book is all about. It's about his evolution. Who is Goggins now? And how and who are you going to be? He'd come up against this opponent he never thought he'd ever meet, which is his own success.
Yep.
And what was he going to be now? And so I think that's what this subtext of this book is. It's a journey of self-discovery, of trying to find out, can I tap in? What can I do next? And the minute he engages and finds a little flash of that Goggins, he wants more of it.
Right.
And where it pushes him, it pushes him in places that then opens up what it means and how to become great, how to become a person of service, adventure, and achievement. And that's really what his journey then becomes. And he does it in a way that's more mature than the Can't Hurt Me version, because he's a different person. He's an older person. He is a more mature person. And so his leadership style completely changes. And in so doing, it tells us what good leadership is. And it inspires us to lead. And leadership doesn't necessarily mean you're the head coach. Right. You could be the guy on the bench and you can still be a leader. And so that's also part of it. So, to me, that's what this book is about. It's about everyone has an opportunity to be great. Yeah.
Well, so lots there, because he talks a lot about too, about the guy who got the Medal of Honor and ended up being a janitor back at I can't remember whether it's the Naval Academy or whatever, and that kind of stuff. And he talks a lot about service and humility. And he talked about trained humility, in that a lot of times when people gravitate, and this is what I think he felt like happened to him, he got into this kind of success level, and then he lost track of some of the things that made him who he was, and he was able to build upon to reach kind of that level of success. And I think the chapters between Moab 1, where he gets the invite, and he's looking in the mirror and he's realizing, man, I don't know if I can do this. And like he says yes, but then he's not really him full self yet. He's not back into full Goggins mode, and the struggles he has there. And he eventually goes back, he finishes it, although he did not, DNF'd and all that stuff. And then the transition between that and a year later when he comes back for Moab 2, it's a pretty profound difference about the way in which he was able to tap into Goggins and become that alter ego in order to do that. And that the transformation of his kind of mental state and who he was as a person and re-identifying, I think that's a pretty powerful part of that story. I think it's really well done.
Thank you. I agree with you. And one thing that's happening in between that is the pandemic happens. And you're talking about in 2020, how it was a dark time, and it was a scary time. And a lot of us were seeing how fragile it all is. And he touches upon the pandemic very briefly.
Yeah.
But what I loved about the way he approached it was he was just focused on himself. How can I improve myself and my place and where I am right now? And, activism is not about that at all, right? It's all about trying to bring a grassroots groundswell to kind of change the dynamics of the world. But as I grow, I realize actually the entire answer is the way David does it. That's the entire answer. It's how can you focus on what you're doing to be your best self? That's always the answer, because, a lot of people did not have a good experience during the pandemic, but David did.
Yeah. Well, which takes us, so one of the other, so let me toss a couple of these out and then we can kind of talk about, because I think we're right on. So one is in the early part of the book, he talks about, he kind of reflects back to being in that Navy SEAL on the beach and all that kind of stuff, and his fear of the water and all that. And he talks, and I thought this was really good in the mindfulness world. So Frankl's book, and he talks about the pause between stimulus and response. And in the pause is where humanity is able to make that difference, and so we are triggered emotionally to do this. And instead of reacting, we want to choose that response. So the search for meaning. And
search for meaning you're talking about?
Yeah. And he talks about, and so David in his thing, he coins it, he calls it winning the second, and as a second in time.
Winning that 1 second.
That 1 second is the difference in your life about transformation. And so he talks about, because each Navy SEAL that doesn't make it and rings the bell, it's there. And then in the moment of duress, they decide, but it's that 1 second. And he talks, I think, really powerfully about not succumbing in the period of duress and putting it off. He talks about taking a hard stop. Even in battle, sometimes they would just kneel down, bullets are still flying, just because everything's so freaking crazy. They don't know exactly what to do, and they have to breathe, regroup, see what ammunition they have left and all that. And he describes it the same way in life, is this win the second is before you make that decision that is going to change your life, in so many radical ways, survive that second. And that means embrace the suck, the grind, whatever's so painful right then, and get through that moment and make a decision later. And I thought that was a really powerful kind of component. And he talks about, think of yourself after you make that decision to quit. And every time you quit, you lose a little part of your soul when you give up chasing your dream. And I thought that whole segment was really powerful. And that when the second thing is really, that is the notion of mindfulness, is like in that moment when I'm really triggered emotionally, my body's breaking down, everything really sucks. Can I sustain who I think I want to be in order to survive this moment? Because if I can survive this moment, then I can build on that moment to keep moving toward the goals that I've set for myself. So anyway, I know I'm rambling there. I don't mean to.
No, I love it. I mean, you're connecting to what I think is a theme with David and his philosophy. And we don't say it explicitly in this, but like when you talk about mindfulness, that to me means an Eastern approach and kind of rooted in Buddhism in terms of mindfulness practice. And many times I said to David, and I think about it now, that this is really the last American samurai. That's what this book is.
Yeah.
It's the song of a samurai and how he approaches his life and his business and the lessons we can take from it to improve our own lives. That's what this is. It's you could say it a different way. I call it, we talk about it warrior philosophy, but when we say warrior, we're not meaning it the same way as Sun Tzu. We're meaning it much more in the kind of peaceful warrior mentality. Although sometimes you do have to get real and it's not so peaceful. He fights. And so I do think of it like that. I think of it as kind of this is the last American samurai. That's who David Goggins is. And he's putting himself in the suck to find out how to persevere, because that's going to help all of us. But it's only because he's a great storyteller too. So it's not just the one thing, it's because he has that ability.
Right. And ultimately, all of life is really just finding ways to enter the hurt locker. I mean, that's honestly, when I took it back, because like we think about mindfulness and all this kind of stuff, we want to push ourselves and all that. But like ultimately, like that's how I interpreted his COVID experience too. Like, okay, like as soon as you think everything's going to go right, and that was like the story of Moab, 1 and 2, because things went wrong on both of them. But don't ever assume everything's going to go according to plan. Anticipate that it's not going to go to the plan. And then the whole point of everything is getting yourself into that position. And then how am I going to respond? How will I think? How am I going to feel? What am I going to do in this moment? And then unpacking your mind in a way to see how you're interpreting the world and those kind of experiences. So in that, the one story I just wanted to throw this, I call it finding the blue line. You guys called it the blue and the black.
Yeah.
Remember the goofy story he saw on some show, and I can't remember what year it was, but the guy ties himself to a balloon. He goes all the way up to outer space, 20 miles above the earth. And then the guy jumps off, reaches 600 miles an hour and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But I thought that
Joseph Kittinger.
Yeah, Joseph. Okay. And it was such when he talks about it, that to me, really, the whole philosophy was the whole point of life. And so for him, it's running 240 miles in Moab. Finding our own personal blue line is unique to each one of us. And so you don't have to compare yourself to anybody else, but you have to gut check yourself. You got to look in your mirror and say, have I reached my blue line?
Right.
Because like, am I willing to go to that point where I am almost passing out? I am almost, whatever that means for me, and then be able to jump off that bitch. And I guess that's the quest, is like, what does that mean for me to push myself? And I want to go back to, and you guys, Chris Hoth, right? I mean, Rituals guy. So Chris, and like, he's been really helpful and supportive too of some of our work, and he's been really good. But, his motto is self-discovery through endurance sports.
Right.
And when I listened to this blue line story, to me, that was the whole point. It's like everything that we do in this realm, and for a lot of us, it's physical, is trying to get ourselves to that point where we enter the hurt locker. We're kind of out of our comfort zone, and we're trying to find our limits in a way. And it's part of it's physical, but it's really about emotionally and intellectually, how are we going to respond in that moment? So I don't know, you heard him tell that story. So how was all that? And am I on track here a little bit about where you guys were going with that?
Yeah, no, you're 100% on track. It's basically, he found a documentary about Joseph Kittinger, who was the first person to go into space. It was before we did the mission on the moon. In fact, his experience of going in a balloon and then jumping out of that balloon above the line where everything goes from blue to black, that allowed them to research the effects of low altitude and space on, you know, the kind of suits they'd wear, everything that made manned space flight possible, that jump. And when he did it, nobody had ever done it before. And so he was really going to where no one had been before. And that captivates David. Like those stories, like the janitor who won the Medal of Honor, but no one realized he was just the janitor in the dorms at the Air Force Academy. No one realized that man had won the Medal of Honor. All these young guys going through, they're going to come out as officers. They're going to do great things in the military. The guy cleaning their showers has the Medal of Honor, and he never told anybody until he was discovered by these cadets. You know, David loves these kinds of stories. And he got fascinated with that line, that blue to black line. Where is that within himself? And so that's what it's all about. I think you've nailed it. I mean, there's nothing more really I can add to it other than to say that the whole point of the book is we all have it. And that line is the line of greatness. That's what that's the glimmer of greatness that we all have to find within ourselves.
Yeah. And I really appreciate when you guys talked about that, there's this point too about don't make greatness something that's so lofty.
Right.
You know, like every person, you know, they put their pants on the same way, they eat breakfast, you know, and they do all those kind of things. And sometimes we think it's like, oh, it's David Goggins, you know, I could never do that because he's so special. Well, you know what, David Goggins wasn't real special. He's 100 pounds overweight, being a late night exterminator, but he found a way to do that. And it's like, and that's one of the things that's so approachable about David's story is that it makes you feel like, you know what, damn it, I can do that shit. I mean, I can do it in my own way. And
greatness is available to everyone because you can always do your job better. There's always more to do. You can always, whatever job you're in, if you're half-assing it, you know, you're not anywhere close to like you can do. We've all been there. We've all gone into shops that are well run and shops that suck. We've all been to banks that, you know, every type of shop we go into, experience we have on an airplane, experience we have with in our own businesses. We know when we're mailing it in and we know when we're giving it our all, and we can see when others are doing that. And his point is it should always be to the top, always, you know, like this is because every day is an opportunity to pursue greatness.
Right. You know, and I just was reflecting on this. But when I was in college, I went to the University of Iowa, played football, but I also wrestled, and head wrestling coach there was Dan Gable. I don't know if you remember the Dan Gable stories, but anyway, he was undefeated all the way through 4 years at Iowa State, and he lost nationals, and he was a gold medal winner against the Russians and all that kind of stuff. But he won 12 national championships at Iowa in collegiate wrestling. And we had, you know, Bannock brothers, we had all these, you know, Olympic guys and all that kind of stuff. And so being in that wrestling room, he was exactly the same thing. It was all about, you know, he doesn't matter. All that matters is what are you doing right now to find your edge and your limit, and how great can you be personally? And it was this constant individualistic challenge every single day you showed up in that wrestling room. And it was really, really powerful. And it really resonates with a lot of stuff that David did. Okay. Let's see. We're going a long time. So I thought his stuff on protecting your foxhole was really good. You know, It really matters. And that's where I really liked how he expanded from the individual. It is an individual journey, but we also, all of us need to have our own team. And so I think there's a really piece there, and it's our duty and our responsibility to ourselves and to those in our foxhole to make sure everybody's a warrior and everybody understands that you have a warrior mentality and they're going to go toe the line with you. So I thought that was really powerful. And then just finally, the part about knowing your purpose. You know, if you're out on that trail and you hit 100 miles and you don't know why the fuck you're out on the trail, it's going to be a problem. So I thought those were really clear. So I don't know. I'll offer those and we'll wrap up because we've been going a while, but I thought those were really good. And if there's anything else, was there another core element of the book though, that we've kind of missed? And again, I don't want to spoil it for folks, but I thought it was really powerful in the way that the stories unfold and then it ties back. And like you said, he does such a great job of unpacking it. So it's kind of, and it's relatable in a way that, hey, I can do this too. And I thought that was really powerful.
Well, the only thing I would say is that, like, add to it. I mean, there's so much in the book. There's dozens and dozens of takeaways. He tried to give as much to the reader as possible. And in terms of his philosophy and through stories, either his example or these examples of these other great people that he's found. But in the end, you know, like, I think what comes out of it more for me is his commitment to service. And I just love where he ends up in his life over this last year and a half. I think it's just, of all the exceptional things he's done, I think that's the most exceptional. And so I don't want to ruin it. I'm not going to spoil it, but like, to me, like where he gets to is probably the most special thing about him so far. That's how I feel about it. You know, that's my own personal feeling, and I'm so inspired by him. So it's really cool to see people also feel that way, because, you know, I think he's a special human being in many ways.
Yeah. And just all the things that he went through in order to achieve that.
Yeah.
Is just like, you keep hearing it in the setback, and this didn't, and again, I don't, but it's just like, you're holy shit, dude. I'm such a wimp. I got to get my ass going. Like, you know, it's like, what the hell am I doing?
Yes.
Like, bam, I know.
Yeah.
We're going to an immediate whiteboard session right after this.
Have you ever ran with him or worked out with him?
No, I've done, you know, the closest I've come is doing the 4x4x48 twice. So I've done that twice, and you know, been in touch with him a little bit in that period. Usually I leave him alone and just watch his videos and then go do it. But I think the last one, I think there was a couple of messages back and forth, or at least I was messaging with Jennifer. And so I've done that twice, but like, I wouldn't see him for very long. You know what I mean? Like, he'd be down the road pretty quick. So no, I haven't done that. The best chance I have is trying to get him in the ocean. That's the best chance I got. If I want to do a workout with him, and even then, I'd be surprised if he didn't leave me even in the ocean. So no, I haven't done that. But he's been, you know, since I injured my ankle in my foot in the same way he was having trouble in the second race in Moab in the book. He's been really, you know, giving me invaluable advice, and I'm lifting weights, which I hadn't done in many years. And I see how weak I am in so many different ways, to try to get my body just centered better, and have a lot more strength and muscle mass that can be used in running. Because I've been running wrong, and so I had an overuse injury. And but looking forward to get back into running, and I've been lifting weights because of him. So, you know, he definitely influences what I do. But no, I haven't worked out with him.
Well, that would be a little intimidating.
A little scary.
Yeah. So
no, for me, it's not, because like, I don't think of myself in that realm. So it'd be easy for me.
Yeah, it's all good. Right?
It would go exactly as I thought.
Right. All the way to plan. So,
right.
Well, another part of our show that we always like to talk about is, I mean, and I think this ties into everything that we're doing with David, but is just the peak performance and the mental preparation for that. So, I mean, I know we talked about writing and like not making it so spiritual, but are there any other like mindset or mental prep things that have helped you along your career, your journey to get to where you are?
Mental prep, in terms of approach to my career.
Meditation, mindfulness, breathwork, journaling.
So I've been doing near daily yoga for many years. So that was probably the first thing that allowed me to get the habit to work. It actually built my discipline, because I didn't think of myself.
What's the practice that you like?
I usually do a flow set, or I do an inversion set or something like that. Or maybe I'll do a yin yoga set. I'll just do one of three. For a while I was involved. I was really into Kundalini yoga, so I might work that in there. Lately it's really been just kind of like 9 sun salutations with different mixes, you know, warrior poses or triangle pose or whatever it is within there. And then on the second day, I'll do an inversion set, you know, headstand, shoulder stand, and, you know, back bends and that kind of thing. So I'll do one of the two. And usually I do it with Zuma running around me, playing or whatever, climbing on me. And so that's typically what I do. My meditation practice is been on hold, because, you know, it's just hard, because I'm the breakfast guy and the morning guy, and I used to do it in the morning. So I haven't come back to it. But what we do is we do an affirmation every morning, Zuma and I. So he'll be playing, and I'll be doing my yoga, and then we'll come together when the yoga's over and we'll do an affirmation. And so we have a couple different ones that we do, and he does it with me. And so we try and do that. The yoga really helped me get some discipline. It was the first thing I did that I was doing every day. And so when I was probably 27, 28, I started to do that. And so then I started making my bed every day and doing yoga every day. And it was really the first signs that this kid was growing up, basically. And so that's helped me all the way through. So I stick with that. And otherwise, that's it. I mean, I think in mindset approach to working, we talked about that, and there's really there's nothing more to add there. I think that's probably the best answer.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And then, you know, we just because we do so many shows with veterans,
yes,
spend a lot of time in kind of the mental health categories, and so we talk a lot because a lot of folks that we have on the show and or that we work with, PTSD, some brain injury stuff and all that kind of stuff. And they fall in and out of kind of dark places and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And not at all to put you on this. I just want, have you had periods though, where you've kind of struggled with, I don't want to call it depression necessarily, but I just wonder, because our big thing is it's okay not to be okay. And
right. Well, I would say I wasn't going to get into this because it's a longer story, but I will just say it. I'm a victim. I'm a victim of sexual abuse as a child. So I've had that. I've gone through divorce. I've gone through eviction notice phases. I've gone through a lot of different dark times. I wouldn't say I have a depressive kind of character in terms of like prone to depression. I'd say I'm the opposite. I'm probably prone to optimism, but that could also be denial. It can go in the denial phase too. And so, I don't have I've never had that experience of depression or PTSD where I'm paralyzed, but I have had heartbreak and I have been at very loose ends and had to fight my way through them. And so, I've had help. I've had therapy in those periods of time. I don't have regular therapy now, but I have had therapy in those periods of times. And now I just have I relied on things like reading the Tao Te Ching every morning after my yoga set or reading something like that. Lately it's been a few different books I've gone to, including Leo Tolstoy has a calendar of wisdom.
I got it.
You got that? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I heard about it on the ritual.
Yeah, because Ken Burns said something in his interview or something that he goes for it. And so that I was like, oh, I love Ken Burns. So I wanted to check it out. So I go to that. So these kinds of things help me keep it all in perspective because there's a season for everything. There's a season for pain, a season for healing. Now I'm in the season of having a young kid. I can't run around the world like I used to anymore. So now I'm like watching 2016, Anthony Bourdain shows to get my wanderlust fix. I'm like, I never thought I'd be there, and so, but you got to remember there's a season for everything. And we all are going to go through dark times. I mean, that's what Never Finish is all about. Like we will all go through dark times. If nothing bad has happened to you yet, just wait a little bit.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say that and I hope it happens to you. I hope it doesn't. There's probably a few golden boys out, like even Tom Brady is going through divorce now. Like no one is immune. No one has the perfect life.
Indeed. Especially after last week when they played the Niners.
You know what? Hey, your ball club, man. Oh my goodness.
That was crazy.
They're just getting better and better, aren't they?
Hopefully we're moving all in the right direction. Yeah. And
it seems that way.
Our boy Brock Purdy, the Mr. Irrelevant. Did you see the QB ratings after the game?
Dude, I mean, crazy. I did not see them, but it was like,
well, he came out at like 138. You know what I mean? And Tom came back at 67.
Right. I mean, I'm not like, I thought, if you look at Jimmy G's track record, he's a winner. I don't really understand all the negativity that he gets because like he's brought him to a Super Bowl. He's brought him to the NFC Championship game last year, which wasn't even a great season for you guys. And yet he still did that. So, I'm not in the Jimmy G can't do it camp at all. But to see him come in, it makes you really feel like God. They might not miss him for a while. Whether he plays this year or not, you have somebody that can maybe do it.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm all with you on Jimmy G. I mean, he's tied for the most wins of a starting quarterback at the Niners. And think about the people that have been there. You know what I mean? And people still complain. So, but okay, let's see. Well, we'll just wrap up. And I want to say thank you. So we're going into the holidays. And so, I know it's kind of different for everybody, but for some folks, it's kind of a stressful, triggering time. I don't know if that's true for you guys, but do you guys have any traditions and or any suggestions for folks to maintain sanity during this, what can be a difficult time frame?
I did. I actually jotted some notes for this because, yes, we just spent time with my family over Thanksgiving, and it was like the most smooth and easy as it's ever been. And I think it was because everyone was staying in a different house or something like that, and then we come together. So space is good, space and light. But if you can't do space, let's see, where did I have it? I think I'm trying to find my thing, but for some reason I'm not finding it. Hang on one second. Sorry, you can edit this part out. All right, I got you. Here we go. Okay. Surviving holiday madness. Here's my tips. Go slow, speak less, appreciate more, and give more than you care to receive.
Oh, you should. Will you send that to us? We'll put those in the notes. That's really good.
Yeah.
Say that one more time.
Go slow, speak less, appreciate more, give more than you care to receive.
There we go.
I love it.
The Adam Skolnick holiday tips.
Recipe for
That's going to go on. Yeah, we got to make a little thing.
I will.
That's really good. Can we put Ben and Jerry's on it too with your?
Yes, if you can get permission to use their trademark.
And then we'll have your goggles on the forehead.
I'm sure I'm going to get sued. I'm going to get sued at some point.
Oh, that's perfect. We're just always kind of, as we're wrapping up, thinking about where people, just having a vision, so we're big on vision boards and all that kind of stuff. But like, where as you're sitting right now, because you've had 2 really successful books that you've been working on. I know you do your own thing, but what do you have down kind of for your North Star and some kind of plan or vision for the future?
Well, I'm finishing a novel that I hope to find a publishing house for. So I'm just kind of like getting to the end of the point where I can actually let someone else look at it and evaluate it with me. And so no one else has seen it at all. I'm doing 10 full drafts of it, 10 full passes before I let anyone else see it. And so I'm almost to that point, and I hope to be there, if not at the end of the year, then very beginning of next year. So that is my next goal in terms of publishing, is to find a publishing house for this novel. And because I got my agent by writing a novel that we couldn't sell. But I found an agent, and an agent came out of it. And that's what ended up hooking me up with David and Can't Hurt Me, and One Breath even before that. So it's really changed my career. But I haven't published one. So I'd love to do that. Fiction to me is the highest form of this craft that I'm involved in. It's much harder in many ways. It's not necessarily more popular these days, but it's definitely I think the utmost form in writing. It's not, if you read not all fiction falls in that category, but to me, when you do it well, it's like the best. So I've always aspired to that, but I also still love nonfiction books. So I'll do the same. I've always done some journalism, writing some books when I can, whether it's another Goggins collaboration. It might be too soon to get into one of those right away, or something else, or a nonfiction book of my own. We'll see, but I'll always write. And so it'll be some form or another.
Okay. Well, if you had one author historically, either alive or dead, that you could go to their holiday party and hang out, what author would you want to go sit with?
What author? It would be Kerouac. I'd want to sit and hang out with Jack Kerouac.
That would be great. I'd like to see us get a little Jack club going. I'm a huge fan. I think that would be really amazing. So
yeah,
all right,
for sure. And Joan Didion would be fun too.
Yeah.
I would love that too. I mean, there's so many writers that have meant a lot to me. But I would say Kerouac would probably be the top.
Okay. Well, that kind of explains a lot then. Okay. Well, we'll close out. The Hidden Pearls podcast is all about finding these hidden pearls in people and organizations and all that kind of stuff that are out there doing things in the world. So just wondering, you've had this experience with David, which I think he's not very hidden anymore, but
no.
Have you had any things? And I guess really where we're going with is just either this time of year or otherwise, what are the kind of things that you see out in the world right now that are giving you hope?
Well, I mean, there's lots of people doing good work out there. The hidden pearl that I've been more interested in lately is someone I've written something about for the New York Times. Hopefully it'll be out pretty soon. Her name is Lakpa Sherpa. She's the first woman to climb Mount Everest 10 times. And no one really even knows about her. She works in Whole Foods in Connecticut. She's a Sherpa herself. She's Nepali. So she's from the Sherpa culture in Nepal. And she's a survivor of domestic violence. She happens to be the highest achieving climber in Everest history. So her life story is unbelievable, and the way she goes about her life and how humble she is it moves me. And so that's what I love. I'm attracted to humility, to be honest with you. It's like the thing that fires me up more than anything is humility. And lately I've been watching a lot of World Cup. I've seen clips of how Messi deals with people who approach him, and he has that humility. I think Rafa Nadal has that humility. And I think Lakpa Sherpa and people that we are around every day have it too. And the more humble we can be and humble up, and I think the better off we're going to be in our life, and the better off others will be. So I'm really attracted to that. And I don't know if that answers the hidden pearl question. I guess Lakpa is a hidden pearl. But that's what fires me up. And that's what gives me hope, is when I see that humility and that generosity.
Yeah, for sure. And which really dovetails in with the way the book ends about trained humility and service to others, because David lands in that camp as well. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, then I guess we're going to extend an offer for a Niners game. I know you said you couldn't do it. So if that happens and you can work your way up the coast, we'd always love to have you.
I'd love to do that. Yeah. Let's then get you guys out to Malibu.
Well, we're going to, next week. So I'll shoot you an email when we get in, and we'd love, I'm bringing my open water suit and we'll be ready to roll. So let's do it. Okay. Then we make a donation to our guests' favorite charity each week. And and if you don't know right now, but if you have one on board, you can let us know, and then we'll put some donation links in there. But we'd like to support any other charity that you're involved in. So I don't know, do you have something that
I love LA Waterkeeper, because they're the people that kind of track water pollution here locally, and they help patrol our marine protected areas. And they're pretty, Waterkeeper is a great organization. They're national, and they're run by people who really care about it, and they have local chapters working on mitigating pollution all over the country. And LA Waterkeeper is the chapter that we know well, and we're donors. We love them, and so that would be a good place to go.
Okay. Then and then also, I know you're on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So you'll send us the right links, and we'll add everything in the show notes, and then send us a donation page for those folks to make sure we get the right one. And we'll pop a donation in there for that. And then anything else I should have asked you if I was better at doing this.
No, you guys are great, man. I hope it's worthwhile to the listeners, and I appreciate being invited on the podcast. It meant a lot to me, and it's great to connect with you guys. It's awesome what you're doing. I'm stoked to see the 49ers doing well, and can't wait to get you in the water.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Looking good. And I've been rambling a bunch. I kind of cut you off. So sorry.
No, it was great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on our show. We'll definitely take you up on Malibu.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right, Em. Take care. Be well. Hope you get better. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for the show. Adam, for being on. It was a really treasure to hear from you and just kind of see you and Pops, the way everything ping pong back and forth. That was really fun to listen and be a part of. So just want to send out a message. Adam's holiday list. Y'all heard it. I'm going to post the graphic on the Hidden Pearls podcast Instagram. So if you need a little reminder on that, but just be gentle, take some space if you need it. And remember to be grateful for the things that we do have. If you are curious about any of the things we talked about, we'll have those linked in the show notes, along with Adam's other books and different social media contacts, so you can kind of see all the different things that he's been involved with. Also everything for the LA Waterkeeper. And also, you guys know, if you want to get involved with our podcast, you can subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss any of the shows. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You can even leave us a review, because it helps our ratings go up, and then we can reach more people and more people hear our message. But either way, we just want to extend out some love. Know that you are never alone, and it is okay not to be okay. And you have a community of people who love you. So thank you so much for being a part of ours, and we'll see you next time. Go Niners.